If you're a bio or medtech company looking at the US market, the window remains open, but the turbulence is real. Before you make the leap, you need a roadmap. Today, we're breaking it down. Welcome. New Frontiers is a podcast that aims to deliver insight into the necessary toolkit of techniques required to conquer new bio and medtech markets internationally. So, if you have accepted the challenge to grow your business across borders and continents, then we hope to provide everything necessary for you to succeed. We will address new and unique topics in each and every episode through a series of conversations with experts. My name is Steve Thomas, and I'm a seasoned marketeer who has operated across the globe in key technology sectors, including bio and medtech, amongst other notable disruptive technologies. I'm one of the principals of Credo, an international marketing consultancy, and sponsors of this episode. Today, we are focusing on the US market and specifically entry into that market. Whether you are based in Europe, India, or Asia, the United States remains a huge scale opportunity. In this episode, we focus on the steps that businesses need to take to prepare for an eventual and successful launch into that region. We start with asking, when is the right time, and what are the key considerations that need to be addressed prior to taking the plunge? In the conversation, we tackle wide-ranging topics from research featuring the use of a market share equation and conducting an opportunity assessment to uncover uncertainties. We review winning practices on team hiring and training, as well as operating effective branding and marketing campaigns. For this introductory session, we are fortunate to be joined by an expert campaigner, someone who has a proven track record in helping medtech companies across the globe to break through growth barriers and scale effectively. With his guidance, one business scaled from a basic startup to generating tens of millions of dollars, showcasing the potential when strategy meets execution. Joe Rowan is an executive with experience in leading global high-tech. With over 35 years in industry, Joe has spent a lot of time in the area of fluoropolymers, working with industry experts, Gore and Junkosia. As a Brit, he brings a unique insight developed on both sides of the pond, with an internal US market perspective and from that of our Asian market entrant. He is currently the CEO of business consulting firm Growth Vectors. So, hey, Joe, thanks for joining us today.
Hey, Steve, my pleasure.
You're very welcome. And it's fantastic. We've been friends and colleagues for a number of years.
Yes, we have.
So it's a real delight to have you on this episode of New Frontiers.
Super. Glad to be here.
Just to kick off, I always like to kind of ask a kind of origin question. And it just occurred to me, I know you studied in Edinburgh, but before that maybe, but when did you first encounter this wanderlust to go abroad or to go international?
That's a really good question because I actually was brought up in a kind of coal mining village in the middle of Fife in Scotland, and it was in the 1960s. I'm showing my age here, but kind of almost at that point, it was like before they built the road bridge. It's kind of like you got to Queensferry and you thought the world ended there. It's like So, it was interesting because um, at the latter end of my career, I was doing 120,000 miles a year traveling, which, someone coming from my kind of humble background, if you like, and never getting out of the county, is quite ironic. But no, having gone to university in Edinburgh and then, broaden my horizons a bit, I was kind of fortunate enough to spend a lot of the early part of my career actually in the States. I worked for two American companies, the Andrew Corporation, who kind of sponsored me through university, and then Gore, that everybody knows, W.O. Gore and Associates. And I was moved to their corporate headquarters in the mid 80s. And it was only supposed to be for a year and a half, and ended up being over 20 years. So that,
Well, and so
yeah.
just to clarify though, Joe, so you worked for Gore in Scotland, did you?
Yes, I did. I worked for
And
Gore in Scotland. Yeah, and they transferred me
then
out
plucked you.
to Delaware.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then the rest is history. Settled there, married there, and I guess kind of moved back to the UK round about 2012, something like that. So yeah, and as you know, I've spent quite a bit of time in Asia as well. My last full time role was as president CEO of Junkosha, Japanese company, and I spent an inordinate amount of time in Japan, which was great. People are fantastic, and yeah, decided to kind of call it a day about 2 years ago and slow things down a bit and retire. But I always want to keep the old grey matter turning, and so I've been doing a bit of consultancy, a bit of coaching, yeah, bit of things just to keep my hand in and to stay abreast of what's going on in medical device arena.
And thankfully you have stuck around, and you do offer advice and consultancy to organizations now. But I'm just trying to tap into that very youthful Joe Rowan
Yeah,
when
be
he
careful where you
arrived
go
in
on that one, Steve.
when he arrived in Delaware.
Yeah.
What was the sense of the opportunity, and how did you fit in?
Well, I think the first thing was, I think I was maybe 22, 23 before I was able to afford my first car in the UK. And then my first trip out to the States, I was never used to these big, long kind of vehicles in the early 80s. And they rented me a kind of Bonneville, which had this big, long nose. And having just passed my test in the UK, this was a recipe for disaster. So I managed to dent another car with the big long nose of this one, and yeah. So look, it was great coming to the States. It really opened my eyes, and the old saying, two countries separated by a common language couldn't be more apt, because I really thought that the opportunity in America, the whole can-do mentality was really, really refreshing. And no no aberrations about the UK and where it came from, but um, the the amount of sheer opportunity in the US was kind of overwhelming, and if you want to apply that to the medical arena, when you look at some of the hubs out there, Minneapolis, the Bay Area, Southern California, Boston, and even frankly Flagstaff, Arizona, where I spent a lot of time with Gore. um, the whole opportunity and the whole ecosystem that builds is something that's very impressive, and America should be very proud of what it's achieved there. Um, if you look at the idea of innovation, that's what America does, and they do extremely well. And, when you look at these kind of ecosystems that have been built, and then these are kind of underpinned by the kind of umbilical cord to your entrepreneurs, to key opinion leaders, to the investment community, you've got all the ingredients in there to have a very successful, very successful medical device industry. And I was lucky enough to run a couple of Gore's businesses as kind of global business leader in the interventional side, and laterally the general surgery side of things. But I think probably, Steve, my biggest challenge really came when I left Gore to kind of move further back in the value chain to Junkosha, who were supplying components to the OEMs. And then, starting a Japanese company's operation in the US and Europe, where there was really nothing there, really kind of tested my mettle, and it really made me draw on my experience and the kind of tool set that I've kind of nurtured over the years.
So, to everybody watching this and to ourselves, US does offer such a massive prize in terms of scale.
Sure.
And it's going to be on the agenda of anybody who's been given the role of looking at growth,
yes,
especially cross-border growth. I guess the first question is, do you have a view as to when is the right time? From any stage of life or of an organization in medtech or biotech.
Yeah, I mean, look, Steve, I'm a product guy, always have, always will be. I'm focused on products, focused on product leadership. And to me, if you've got the right product, anytime's the right time. Now, having said that, you could go broke in a hurry by rushing headlong into, a market that you don't know, that's thousands of miles away from your home market. And you'll run yourself ragged, wear down a lot of shoe leather, and go broke if you don't go about this the right way. And the challenge I had with Junkosha was there's kind of four things that go into a market share. Okay, you got product, price, awareness, and availability. And Junkosha had zero awareness and zero availability, and this is kind of multiplicative. So if any of them go to zero, it doesn't matter how good your product is, you're still zero. But, we weren't known, we weren't the cheapest, we didn't have, a sales infrastructure, a fulfillment infrastructure. So it really comes back to the product. And that is where I'm a strong advocate. You've got to make sure you've got a dynamite product. You've got to make sure that product is leveraging the technology platforms that the company has. You've got to kick those platforms hard. You've got to kick that product strategy model hard to make sure that it's robust. You've got to make sure that there's core technology that is either through patents or embedded intellectual property. You've got to make sure that that is solid, that it's robust, it's sustainable. And then, this delivers platforms and, sustainable technologies coming from it. But, you also got to have some enabling skills and strategic enabling skills round about that, such that the product you bring to that market is special, is differentiated. And the sweet spot is when you've got that product and you're able to address unmet needs with that product. That's the sweet spot. That's what makes it sustainable. And I'm not just talking environmentally, I'm talking about financially sustainable if you've got that. And so, every company I've been with, that's been fortunately a premium that the company themselves have had, and something that I have spent a lot of time on in terms of really honing and fine-tuning my kind of skill set to make sure that I'm able to take companies like that with such a strong, I guess, product concept statement that's underpinned by strong technological roots and core competencies, that's the kind of businesses that I've focused on. And to me, you better make sure that when you're coming across the Atlantic or coming across the Pacific, you've got to make sure where you're planting your flag. Is it in product leadership? Is it on operations? Is it customer intimacy? You got to make sure you know who you are and what's going to make you successful. In my case, it was working with kind of product leadership companies, and that really helped planting the flag, being very clear about who you were, who you weren't, and what you were going to leverage to be successful in that new geography.
Right. And so you seem to be characterizing a company that may have built up a reputation in a home territory or
Yes.
maybe in a region.
Yes.
But even that, you would have to audit the opportunities amongst your products and then look to ones that are optimal in the US market. Is that the process?
Yeah. I mean, because, any company, Ginkgosha was a good example if you want to look at that. Ginkgosha had been around a long time, had a product portfolio that was pretty broad, but some of the products were older, kind of more commoditized. The last thing you would do is bring a commoditized product to a market where you've no awareness and you've no sales channels, and you're never going to be the cheapest. So, that ruled out what you would bring and what you wouldn't bring. And, I happened to bring a product that was unique, differentiated, patented, and, that made my life infinitely easier. And I think it helped us to get a kind of beachhead into the US and European markets. And, that's where the story started.
Yeah. So you described, you introduced us to that career, which started with Gore, which is obviously known for it has a reputation for training and, its staff. You obviously benefited from that, and both internal and external. You obviously have I know personally you have a tool set that you bring to any new project like that.
Yeah.
I was wondering if we could quickly tick through some of those tools that you think people should go through in order to prepare for this, which can be a sizable project.
Yeah, I mean, Gore, the training I got at Gore, and I think anybody who was around Gore, I don't know these days, but what the essence of the work that they do with in terms of training. But back then, it was second to none. And a lot of really valuable tools that I've used, I've adapted, I've expanded, have helped me create my own kind of tool set, but they're all really around opportunity analysis. That's one of the big things is opportunity analysis. And, I was fortunate enough with Gore to go to the Wharton Business School and do some stuff there. And I think one of the best tools I've used and kind of one of the highest gain tools I've used is one that Professor Day at Wharton introduced. And that's the concept of real win worth. So you've got to make sure if you're going to start out in a venture, that venture is real. Is the product real? Is the market real? And there's a whole series of kind of seed questions that challenge you on that kind of premise and challenge you to really identify the uncertainties around it. These uncertainties may be in your kind of gut, like, well, I'm not sure about this product. I'm not sure about that market opportunity. Being able to surface them, being able to articulate them, and being able to address them with cross-functional teams, it is really powerful. And so, even if a product is real and you've satisfied it's real in terms of the product itself and the market opportunity, you've got to make sure you can win, and that brings up a whole series of analysis and questions that talk about, your competitive advantage. And that's something that the Wharton Business School did an immense job of it, really drilling into competitive advantage. But, you've got a product, it's real, the market's real, you think you're going to be able to win, so what? If it's not worthwhile doing, then why would you embark on it? So this whole kind of very powerful amalgam of these three things, real, win, and worth, is something that I've used extensively in my career. And I think it's been very helpful with clients I've had, with companies I've worked for, to really make them explore um, the opportunity in a very objective, sometimes very tough way. But business is tough, and you got to make sure before you start spending serious cash that you've really answered some of these uncertainties. Because the product graveyard is full of companies that haven't.
Yeah. I mean, are there any factors that can get overlooked from that view, that kind of analysis? I mean, for instance, any cultural differences. You've brought an Asian company
Yeah,
into the States.
yeah.
I suppose it's difficult to characterize all the regions, but what are the kind of surprises or the things to watchwords for US market entry?
No, that's a really great question, Steve. It, it, it- you know, um, just because something is successful in the homeland, it doesn't automatically translate to, these overseas markets. And having lived half my life in Europe and half in the States, um, by the time I picked up the Junkosia opportunity, I think it's fair to say, and having had global business leadership experience with Gore, I think it was fair to say that I kind of knew what I didn't know, if you like. And so I was wary of the fact of just, kind of replicating something from another country, another culture, another philosophy, another way of doing business, and just trying to, plant it in the US and Europe and think it would be successful, because it's not. Um, you really people do business with people, and one of the things that I think we did well at Junkosia was very quickly, um, when I took on the role, say that, okay, the market, we really don't in Japan. The US and European market, and fortunately they let me run for a while, um, because I think it would have been very difficult for Japanese, indigenous folks to come over and maybe do what I did. Doing what I did, I was creating relationships, which is really, really important. And it's not so easy. It'd be impossible for me if I go to Japan in reverse and do the same. It just wouldn't happen. So it was easier for me to develop relationships, to understand the nuances of the market, and particularly to kind of test the product concept. Because if you don't have the product, it doesn't matter about anything else. And so, for the first year coming over, I had to make sure that I understood what the unmet needs were in the US and European markets, because they may not have been. In some cases, it turned out not to be the same kind of unmet needs as the Japanese market. And so even though I was cognizant and I was given the kind of training manual, if you like, about the product from the Japanese team, I was always keeping my eyes and ears open for what were the subtle nuances, what were the aspects that were resonating in the US and US market that maybe didn't. And I was supported by an incredibly responsive technical team and business leadership team and the board in Japan, and was able to make some good headway in terms of honing the product portfolio to really get it aligned with the needs of the European and US market. But then comes marketing. Then comes a marketing aspect that I know because we've done a bit of work in this area together. But never assume that what was successful in a foreign market is going to translate to a local market. It just doesn't work like that, especially when you're looking at far off countries like Japan and Asia. People
Yeah,
are
I was going to ask actually, Joe. I mean, just how did people receive you? You know, I mean, and this is a Japanese company.
they,
Can you characterize? You've got a Rolodex perhaps of people you need to connect with, and
yeah,
we'll get on to marketing. I don't want to ignore that, obviously,
yeah,
but
yeah, yeah.
I just wondered how it landed with people. And maybe there's a kind of category of client that's willing to consider and those who aren't. I mean, it can be, I guess, pretty overwhelming, that process.
Yeah.
Any insight on that?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. A lot of sleepless nights, that's for sure. But what I'd say to you is this: is that when I actually threw my lot in with Junkosha, I had my own consultancy company, and I decided not to continue my consultancy company, and I think that proven to be the right thing. Why? Because Junkosha had like a pedigree. They had deep roots in Japan. Their technology that was well known. Maybe not so much the products in the US and Europe, but I could point to legitimacy. I could point to the fact that, okay, here's this Lone Ranger, one man and a dog, and I didn't even have a dog,
Oh,
calling
sure.
on these high end OEMs. And, nobody wants to bet on somebody who doesn't have an infrastructure or a support system round about them. And that's what I did. I threw my lot in with Junkosha. I focused on Junkosha, no other clients, and one of the things I'd give to anybody that's a budding entrepreneur or a budding business person is focus. You got to focus. So I spent a lot of time focusing on this one product in really one main segment in medical, and lo and behold, as I built the relationships up, and as we started to see some traction and some design wins, because what you got to look at is what constitutes success. In my case, after a year or two, it's not going to go in and go from zero to millions and millions in 1 year in a regulated industry like medical devices. You got to look at what the parameters are and the barometers of success. And that really is design wins. So I was able to get a few design wins. And what you got to do in this whole area, you got to get the right folks. You got to call on the right people. And a lot of the work I'd done in the past on things like strategic selling, it's much better to get someone in trouble mode. Okay. If someone's in trouble mode, then they will pull you through quite quickly because you've got the solution to their problem that's keeping them awake at night or stopping the production line or destroying yields or whatever. And I was able to do that in a couple of cases. So when you get that, you support the hell out of it because that's a golden opportunity for you as a sales or business person. And another thing, and one of the tools from way back was like crossing the chasm. Okay, and so you got to look at early adopters. You're wasting your time if you're taking this new innovative product that we had developed at Junkosha, and try to sell it to someone who is incredibly conservative. They're not going to do, and if they're in even keel or overconfidence mode, why would they? They're not going to do it. So there is a process, and one that we perfected at Gore and that I've taken with me is the whole idea of crossing the chasm, where you get early adopters. You build on those early adopters, and you use them to help you cross the chasm into the early majority. And then there's late majority, late adopters, laggards and all that. But when you are taking a new product to market, it's that whole idea of early adopters, crossing the chasm into the early majority. And frankly, I applied that tool set quite rigorously. I still I still burned up an awful lot of shoe leather, but it was well worth it because I would go out and I knew exactly what I was trying to do, why I was trying to do it, and strategically what it was underpinning in terms of the bigger plan. And yeah, so I mean, it's like planning and strategy are fantastic. I'm a great advocate of it, but there's no substitute for the voice of the customer, and that's where you learn. That's where you learn where the majority of unmet needs reside, and that is the kind of vehicle to help you develop new products or derivative products or or breakthrough products. So that's kind of how I went about it, Steve, in the new geography. Again, still leveraging that whole product leadership side of things. Yeah.
That's very interesting, and I'd like to kind of pull out one thing I've noticed, which I think is a good swing thought, and it's attributed to your success. Has been that it's not an aggressive approach; it's actually a sharing approach. I
Yeah.
noticed that you will take a product concept and you will share it. You offer to share it with a customer
Oh, absolutely.
and get their full evaluation. And that I think that's quite unique, Joe. I think I'd like you to explain that.
Sure. Um, Look, this whole idea of kind of product concept statements, where you're really trying to look at your technology, look at the unmet need in the market, look at your platforms and how you might deliver this product, etc. And then that leads you to think about you know what these unmet needs truly are, what companies might have these unmet needs, who in the company might be people to target. Um, but really, that's an inside-out approach, and that in isolation is useless. So you gotta you gotta get your hands dirty, and one of the ways that I found to do it in an effective way is to be very open and very collaborative with customers, and just say, hey, here's what I'm thinking. Tell me where I might be going wrong. Tell me how you would hone this so that I can be the best partner for you, because I don't want to waste my time or your time focusing on a concept that has no value, that is not going to make your life easier, that's not going to add some value to you. And so this whole idea of collaboration after non-disclosure agreements are signed off, um, yeah, it worked really well. And we were able to to get on board with a few large companies, and thankfully the team in Japan were absolutely supporting me technically, operationally, and I've only good things to say about what we achieved together.
So you've got a bridgehead. Maybe that's the
Yeah,
first
yeah,
target. You've landed in the
yep.
US, and now you may have a couple of customers and some orders coming
Mhm.
in. How do you expand from there? And I guess there are questions. We can get to the marketing thing, but there's also the immediate need to employ people
Mhm.
or to expand.
Yeah, yeah,
Any thoughts on that? And I mean, it's particular to the US because we are
yeah,
focused on the
yeah.
US here.
So yeah, that's a good question. I mean, so I was effectively running myself ragged between Japan, US, and Europe, and you know, we're getting the design wins, sales were growing, we were developing a critical mass, and so we decided to hire. Um, and I've hired many, many people in my career, and some good, some not so good, but we won't dwell on that. And look, it's a lottery. I've got friends that are in consultancy, and they're really good at their job, but at the end of the day, you just never know. You can do what you can to kind of minimize the chance of something going wrong. Um, but one thing I learned from Bob Gore way back, and I was fortunate enough to know him quite well, and his dad before him to some extent, but he always used to bet on the man. Okay, bet on the man, and so or woman, But I was fortunate enough to meet, um, believe it or not, a very coachable young graduate. And probably as I look back on it, it was like, what the hell were you doing? Hiring someone so new, fresh out of university. But I had a really, really good feel about this guy. Yeah, tons of integrity, hardworking, honest, sharp as a whip. And so I spent the first 3 to 6 months taking him with me on sales calls, coaching him, mentoring him, taking him aside and giving them some feedback as to, you may not want to do that going forward, and here's why. How about this, Um, and I'm happy to say that that young man, probably 12 years on, or I don't know, 10, 12 years on, is now sales director for the company. And, I bet on the man. And he and I had a lot of fun together, worked incredibly hard, had some tears, but we really, you look back at the growth, and it's something that he and I and the team in Japan could be very proud of.
Yeah. And in terms of comms and keeping that team together and motivated towards the target, what's your thinking on that? Is it just the
Yeah,
gel, if you like?
yeah. I mean, look, I think the one thing I've learned as a leader is that um, uh, you can call yourself a leader, but unless you've got followers, by the technical definition, you are not a leader. So I've spent a lot of time over the years really trying to make sure that I get people on board. And that comes back to, you got to create a vision. You got to create a sense of purpose for people. And you got to let them know where, they may be further back in the chain. They might have no customer visibility. They may be in a tool room. They may be wherever. But you got to let them know why you are telling them to get out of their bed in the morning and come and put a real shift in and make a difference. And that is something that I guess I've prided myself on unwittingly, is to form strong teams because, again, Bob Gore would say, you get the right people, you put them in the right environment, give them a sense of purpose and some initial direction, and they get the hell out of their way. And if you've got the right people will go the extra mile. Why? Because they're driven, they're involved, they're engaged, they feel, really attached to what it is you as a team are trying to pull off, and they don't want to let their teammates down. And so, and I think that is another thing that we did quite well, is that, you've got half of the team in Europe and US, and you've got, well, not half, you had a smaller part, but you got whole infrastructure back in Japan. And I made it my business that when I went back to Japan, that I would take time with the team members there. I'd go out for a beer, and I'd go out for a karaoke and do whatever. But I wanted to make sure that they understood that, hey, this is not just about the kind of sexy front end customers bringing in big orders, but we would be nothing without you guys, again, going the extra mile. And they did. I mean, my goodness, the work ethic in Japan is fabled. And I can tell you, it's very, very true. I was lucky enough to work with a group of people who, when they gave a commitment, they followed through. And so, building global teams like that, Steve, you can't put.
I think you mentioned the relationship with the kind of mother country, if you like, and the team there. That's very important. I was trying to speculate, and I think I know what your karaoke song is actually. I definitely, it's got something like Halls and Oates, I guess.
Geez,
is that your default?
Youth, I actually was lucky enough to spend a bit of time with John Oates through some contact.
Right, word. Well, not many people can say that. I can't say that about to be of diamonds. Okay, so you're building your team. Just to touch on marketing and probably even a broader sense in terms of sales. I think the biggest barrier, and that this is my point always, is trust. That is the barrier that builds down. You might get people in trouble. You might get people in growth mode, which I think is the other,
Yeah,
fact, where you're going to get adopters.
yeah.
There's always a rump of people who don't want change and are resistant to it, and
Yeah,
may have a stereotypical view
yeah,
of where you're from or whatever.
yeah.
Um, how do you think it's broken down? What works? Is it the same process of just personality,
And
proximity?
again, people do business with people, and you're right to bring up growth mode because, yeah, you might get one or two companies in trouble mode. Um, but, more than not, you'll get companies in growth mode. Yeah, you will get companies and people and groups that are in even keel and they're kind of not interested in what you've got to offer. So the most of the companies there are really in growth mode. And the thing about growth mode is it doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen overnight in medical. Regulated industry, you got to make sure that you go through all of the studies, biocompatibility, design validation, design verification, all of that stuff. So it is a long process. And so if you're someone bringing a new product from a country 9,000 miles away, and you're asking someone to put their career on the line to adopt you, you better make sure they trust you. And the way to get folks to trust you is not just to talk about it, is to do it. And I went through a period there where, many moons ago when it was almost, I'd get Japan first thing in the morning, and then I get UK, and then I get East Coast, West Coast, and then it's back to Japan again. But, effectively was on call, just me and the new sales guy. And you got to go that extra mile. You got to, I very lucky. I a lot of the folks that I work with turned out to be friends and people I still keep in touch with to this day. And you know, they would never share with me things that they shouldn't, but I knew when they were under pressure. I knew when yields weren't where they should be. I knew when they were getting pressure from their bosses, to speed things up, etc. So, I think the way I looked at it was that, hey, I'm like a virtual addition to this company via this conduit or these conduits with the people I'd built the relationships with. And, I kind of, in a lot of ways, treated those companies like my own company. And if you've got that perspective, you've got that outlook, you don't need told what to do. You do what you think is right. And that's why I think sometimes, especially at the tactical side, you can get too analytical. We all know what the right thing is. And if you create the environment and you trust people to make the right decisions, and be sure that if they're going to make a huge decision, that they come back to you and consult. But for the most part, people want to do the right thing. And, and if you can create that collegiate sense of collaboration with working with customers, and and you then start to deliver trust, and it just builds and it builds and it builds, because the more times that you kind of help them out and the more times that they challenge you and you come through for them, trust is almost the unspoken word.
Yeah.
We never say it.
Absolutely.
So you trust me. It's like it's there.
Yeah, yeah. I think there are some simple factors that support that, isn't there? One is being transparent, as you say.
Totally.
Sometimes it's being actually to turn things down, opportunities you can't deliver on.
Totally.
Build that that trust that in everyday transactions.
Yeah, and as a leader, you do that with your team as well. You got to do that with your team as well. You got to. That's where the leader comes in. Those values that you've adopted and have been successful for you, you've got to, you got to make sure they permeate into your team as well. Sorry, yeah.
No, but I just think that I agree totally. The important thing is just you make sure that everybody is operating along the same lines. That it's common, a common view and a common action across everybody. But I think that, yes, as I say, transparency, that relationship is what you're talking about. But one thing that I'm always a slight bugbear is that people don't seem to want to talk about themselves enough, and their in terms of their own credibility, their own history, their clients that may be in Japan or they might be in their region of origin where they've built that reputation of having other people uh, validation. You've got to be prepared to speak that. He's got to be prepared to show reflect that, whether that be in the press or whether that be in everyday material that you show people as well. You know, you've got to reinforce it with some simple ingredients.
You do, Stephen, and that's where I guess maybe the cultural thing can creep in as well. I mean, you know,
Mm.
the Japanese, for example, are incredibly modest. I have never met a race that are as modest as the Japanese. They will hide their light under a bushel, and they'll never tell you what they've done, and never big themselves up. And I guess being brought up in a kind of Scottish coal mining community, where there was a strong sense of community, nobody really bigged themselves up there as well. And so, you've got, I guess you were there when you're encouraging us to, put our best foot forward and talk about what we've achieved and what we could achieve. Yeah, you do have to, you got to look at it pragmatically and say, yeah, I mean, that third vector in there for market share is awareness. So unless people know about you, it doesn't matter how good your product is. And if you think, as we did, our product is going to make a difference and is going to make a difference to ultimately patients, then I turn it around and say you've almost got a duty to perform to make people understand and know about what it is that you're bringing to the table and what you've got to offer. And so, we did that in Ginkosha. We learned, we kind of, it didn't come naturally to the team in Japan, but we went through it together. And, at the latter end, as you know, we developed a pretty decent sense of awareness in that particular area. And Gore, in the 80s and 90s in Gore, might come as a surprise, but marketing was almost a swear word. We never really were such a product company. We never talked about marketing, but look at, Gore now in marketing and, the brand. I mean, the brand, especially when things like consumer fabrics is everything.
Yeah,
And the Gore brand now in medical devices is, it means trust. It really
yeah,
does,
yeah,
ironically. And I mean,
absolutely.
that's what it means to me because, Gore have really done an incredible job with the quality of the products and doing the right thing. And so that goes a long way to building trust and that whole outward facing marketing, branding, engagement, multiplying success in terms of those early wins and bolstering it with marketing and different channels to market.
So, look, there are so many factors to consider. I think I'm going to come up with we're going to run out of time. But so I think there are obviously things like, regulations and things like that. I think we're going to have to say that for another episode, Joe, to be honest.
Sure.
But I just wondered, from your experiences of doing this, what keeps you going? Say you're over that bridgehead moment, and you now having to expand. What is that thought in your head that you got that people should retain from your experience?
Well, what keeps you going? I guess what kept me going, and everybody's a little bit different, is that, as we got bigger and we hire people, and they commit to the cause and they come in and they're really energized. I look at these people we've hired and I know, my boss in Japan, who was the chairman, he's the same. That I look at these people and I see behind them, a mortgage, a college payment. I see people who are depending on me and other leaders to, to help steer the boat in the right direction and do the course correction necessary. And yeah, I mean, there's personal rewards that come out of it, and that's one aspect. But you've got to do it for the right reason. And I think internally, inside out, that's what drove me, and outside in, it was patience. And ironically, with Go, and let's just finish off quickly with this. I was very lucky. I had a procedure, pretty significant procedure on my colon, and we actually used at that time a trial product on the procedure that I had, and it kind of, 25 years later, I'm healthier than I've ever been. And so, I'm able to kind of map what we were doing into my personal well-being and health. And, I think we're all lucky in the medical device industry that we can say that when we come home at night, that we've actually helped make someone better, or make a family's life better, or the quality of someone's life better. And what more could one ask for?
Absolutely. Gosh, proof of the pudding.
Yes, indeed.
Certainly.
Believe me, I added a new dimension to taking one for the team. This was I had a sigmoidectomy, so I won't leave too much to the imagination there.
Yeah, that's serious stuff.
Very
But
lucky that.
So, Joe, just let's finish off with, you are consulting now. You do have a business, in the UK, but it's very international.
Yeah.
Is there anything if people had any questions or follow up from this, or just wanted to know how you might help? What would
I'm retired, and I'm actually moving to Portugal soon to really enjoy retirement. But I've got one client that I'm doing work for right now, maybe a day a week, and I'm really enjoying that. I'm doing a little bit of coaching and a couple of things on the horizon. But I'm always good to talk to people, and if I can help, But I want to get a much better balance in my life than I did when I was in corporate, because
good for you.
It wasn't easy. The view was worth the climb, but it's good being in this position now with a much better balance. So thanks for asking, Steve. And my company's called Growth Vectors Consulting, which hopefully, after what I've said today, it can the name underpins the
absolutely. It seems to tie up. Good bit of marketing there.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, so look, thank you so much for being in this conversation.
Great.
Again, it's one of those occasions where it kind of opens up a whole host of other topics, I think, that we should really explore. Maybe we can have you along again. But look, I'm going to say thank you very much for this conversation today. I really appreciate it.
Great. Thanks, Steve. Thanks for inviting me. Really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Cheers, then.